Welcome to European Journeys. This is the seventh stage of a tour that takes us to Latvia and Estonia, where we explore the Reformation that happened there in the 16th century. And in fact, for our stage, we are returning today to Latvia, into a small town called Valmiera. It is a town of about 25,000 inhabitants. It is located in the northeast from Riga, and not so far from the Estonian border at about 50 kilometers or so. Now, even though it is a small town, Valmiera was a place of high importance, of high strategic importance in the past for the entire land of what was called Livonia. Now, as a reminder, Livonia corresponded to modern-day Estonia and Latvia. And so that place was important. And that is because there is a river crossing the town, the river Gauja, and so it was a place of military strategic importance. And this can still be seen today, in fact, because if we visit the town, we discover the ruins of a castle called the Livonian Order Castle. These are ruins, but it used to be a defensive castle there in Valmiera, which was called Volmar at the time by the Livonian Order, who were German-speaking people. And the castle today is in ruins, and that is a testimony of the fact that many attacks happened there in its history. And the ruins today are a testimony of one of the last attacks that happened there during the Great Northern War. The castle was destroyed in 1702 and never rebuilt since. Well, the castle, the Livonian Order Castle, was not just a defensive fortress. It was also a place of important governmental decisions. If you remember, in our last stage in Tallinn, we had talked about something that was organized usually in the empire, in the German Empire, called a Diet. It was an early form of a parliament, and important decisions were taken there in those gatherings. And usually the Diets for the entire land of Livonia were organized there in the Livonian Order Castle. And in the 16th century, three important deeds happened there, which will help us understand how the Reformation evolved in the entire land of Livonia. So today what we are going to do is to look at those deeds and see how, in fact, the Reformation finally was adopted in Livonia. The first deed we want to look at is a deed that was organized in 1522. Now let's get back a bit into the context of the time. 2 years earlier, Andreas Knöpken returned to Riga. He was one of the first reformers of Livonia. He began to preach the gospel there. Great crowds gathered around him, and also his colleague, Sylvester Tegetmeier, who came shortly after him. And obviously that greatly upset the church, the Roman Catholic Church at the time. Obviously the Roman Catholic Church was controlling the land for about 3 centuries already. It was called Terra Mariana, and whatever the church said had basically the authority, legislative authority, basically. So the deeds up until then were highly controlled, greatly influenced by the church. And so in 1522, the deed was organized there in Volmar because, in fact, shortly before that, a disputation had been organized in Riga between the Roman Catholic hierarchy and the reformers. And the Roman Catholic hierarchy lost the debates. They could not stand on intellectual ground to defend their own position. Those who were defending the gospel were greatly winning this debate. So the second step was taken by the Roman Catholic Church, that was to now proclaim the Reformation as illegal, as heretical, the words that were used at the time, heretical. And so 1522, that was the proclamation of the Roman Catholic Church to declare Luther's teachings, the Reformers' teachings, as heretical. Well, usually when the Roman Catholic Church declared someone movement to be heretical, usually they succeeded in have the population accept that sentence. But this time, the total opposite happened, especially in the main cities of Livonia. That is Riga, but also Dorpat, which is today Tartu in Estonia, and Reval, which is today Tallinn in Estonia, the main cities of Livonia decided not to take account, not to obey this proclamation, and to continue to adopt the Reformation. So the total opposite effect of what the Roman Catholic hierarchy had wanted. Now, that's for the first deed. The second deed happened 3 years later, and many events happened in between. And in fact, the reformer side had hoped that that deed would adopt the Reformation for the entire land of Livonia. This had already been done in the main cities, in Riga, in Tallinn, in Tartu. But in the meantime, peasants' revolt happened, and also there had been acts of iconoclasm, and that had cooled down some of the main actors that could have influenced the adoption of the Reformation in the land, and in particular the nobles, who saw in the beginning that the Reformation could give them freedom from the yoke of the Roman Catholic hierarchy, now had been a bit cooled down, and obviously the Roman Catholic hierarchy had taken advantage of that situation to try to gain back the nobles with them. So the Reformation was not adopted during that deed. Nevertheless, we find during that deed several reformers being there at the table of discussions there, and one of them was Sylvester Stegertmeier, one of the main reformers in Livonia. He had been in Riga, then he went to Tartu, and he preached there every day. And in fact, he compared the Roman Catholic hierarchy to the robbers in the temple. So you can see a little bit the situation, the atmosphere that was reigning in Livonia at the time, which was not a peaceful atmosphere at all. Well, the Reformation stagnated a little bit for about 3 decades, and finally a third deed was organized in Valmiera in 1554. And that was the deed in which finally the Reformation was adopted in Valmiera for the whole land of Livonia. So it took more or less 3 decades finally to get out from that period of stagnation in which the Roman Catholic Church was trying to gain back the land. Finally, in 1554, the Reformation was adopted. And that is an important time because it was in fact a year before the adoption of the famous Confession of Augsburg in Germany, which would then proclaim Protestants the lands where the prince was Protestant, or the lands that would have adopted the Reformation. The Confession of Augsburg was finally adopted around the same year. So it's an important, crucial time for the Reformation, not just in Livonia, but in the entire Germanic Empire, the 1550s. So 3 deeds that show us a little bit how the Reformation evolved in Livonia, and it was not a simple task at all. There had been a lot of pushbacks, but nevertheless in 1554, finally the Reformation was adopted in Livonia. I'm Cedric Placentino. See you next week for another stage of European Journeys.